It is perfect timing. We are delighted to kick this off. So I have the honor and pleasure today to host our directors panel for our Lunch and Learn session. So you would have just had the chance to watch a short video about many different academic centers and institutes for human-animal bond around the globe. And today we have a chance live to ask questions of 6 directors of these centers and institutes. We have some of my very favorite people here, so I myself am personally excited to chat with these individuals who lead academic centers and institutes for human-animal bond. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask the first question. So I'll ask that you introduce yourself, say your name, your center and affiliation, and then go ahead and answer the first question. And because we are virtual, I will just call on you in alphabetical order. So to kick this off, the first question is, what is your favorite part about being a director of a Center for Human-Animal Bond? And we will go alphabetically, starting with Dr. Beck.
I suppose my favorite, I'm Alan Beck at Purdue University, Center for the Human-Animal Bond. And this field, and the center would actually be a good example of it, is its variability and diversity is just very exciting. No one project is like another. Great variety of colleagues, great variety of students.
Wonderful. We will follow with Dr. Binfei.
Hi there, folks. John Tyler Binfet, and I'm the director of a program called BARC, Building Academic Retention Through Canines, at the University of British Columbia. My favorite part of the job, I'd have to say I leave work covered in dog hair typically, and that's always sort of a bonus, but reflects kind of my interactions throughout the day. And it's when the student who with sort of tear-filled eyes will say, I miss my parents, but I miss my dog more. And we play a small role in the BARC program and sort of meeting that need for students. So that's a lot of joy is derived from those interactions.
Thank you. All right, next, Dr. G.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy G. I'm at the Center for Human-Animal Interaction in the School of Medicine at Virginia Commonwealth University. And this is a really hard question for me to answer. What's my favorite part? I sort of feel like the job that I'm in was designed for me. I love all parts of it. I love that I get to do research. We're starting a clinical trial. We are literally enrolling participants now. I love the education part. So we're in the School of Medicine. So we're kind of unique in that we have med students and psychiatry interns and a variety of different sort of healthcare connections in our center. But kind of going back and echoing what John Tyler said, I've had the opportunity to really go and see our dogs at work in various places in the hospital. And I'll tell you, there are times when there is not a dry eye in the place. I mean, we go into the infusion clinic where children are undergoing chemotherapy. When the dog walks in, the tenor of the environment just changes. Parents, they look at their child who before was just very down and, obviously in pain and uncomfortable and going through this chemotherapy experience. And then just for a brief moment, they're just a child interacting with a dog. And that is such a meaningful experience to just sit there and watch this burden lift off the parents just for that moment and seeing that child smile just in that moment. There's nothing like that experience in the world. And so anyway, I'd say that's my favorite thing.
Those are a lot of wonderful ones. Thank you. Next, Dr. Mueller.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm Megan Mueller, and I am director of the Tufts Institute for Human-Animal Interaction and also part of the Center for Animals and Public Policy at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts. And, I echo a lot of what my colleagues have said. It's really just such a fun field to work in. I think I love the interdisciplinary nature of this field. In what other circumstance would a developmental psychologist get to work at a veterinary school? I know Maggie has a similar experience, but it's really just great to work with people who have different types of knowledge than you do. I feel like I learn something new every single day from the people that I work with. So it's really fun just to be constantly learning new things. And I think it's also really a privilege to get to study something that is so important in so many people's lives. I think our interactions with animals are really what makes us humans. And we have the privilege of studying the science behind that. So it really just never gets old, and it's a fun job to have.
Completely agree. Next up, Dr. Olson.
Hello, my name is Christina Olsen. I'm the director of International Center of Anthrozoology. I come from Norway, and I totally agree with all the things that have been said here. And I actually created my own job because I loved the field of human and animals. So I created this center in 2004 with the purpose of having a nice job where I could combine both, that I could educate and also could work in practice. And I know that the work our center does helps so many people, and not only people, but also the animals. And that gives me joy every day. That's definitely the best part of being a director. But I'm also very happy to work with my wonderful colleagues and together with them develop the field of animal-assisted interventions.
Wonderful. Next, Dr. Udell.
Hi, I'm Monique D. I'm from Oregon State University, the Human Animal Interaction Laboratory. I have to say that my favorite part of what I do is getting to work with people and animals to help them build their bonds and relationships. Relationships are bidirectional, they're dynamic. We see human-animal interactions in a diverse range of settings, but really, I think working with animals and people to help build sort of mutual trust and understanding and strong relationships is such a foundation for so much of the other work that we do. I really just enjoy getting to play a small role in that process.
Awesome, thank you. So aren't these individuals so lucky to get to do this career, which, leads into the next question that we've gotten, which is, do you have any advice for someone who wants to pursue a career in the field of human-animal bonds? So I'm not going to call on everyone individually for our next questions as they flow in, but feel free to just jump in and answer when you feel motivated. So the question is, what advice do you have for someone who wants to pursue a career in the field of human-animal bonds?
I'll jump in first, Maggie. Your prior panelists, Lori Kogan and Phyllis Erdman, have written about this as career paths in human-animal interactions in the social sciences. So folks who are interested in this can read up about sort of the stories behind people like us on the panel today who have discovered or created, as Christine said, our employment. One of the challenges around this is you have to straddle sort of expertise in human psychology or welfare and then the animal. And so that is really a formidable task to be at a high level methodologically, both in a human-centric and then animal-centric field. So I would say anything you can do around training in these areas would really undergird the career path. So that would be my advice on that.
I guess I'll go next. I think that it's really helpful to have a community. So connect with other people. I think that's sort of part of getting involved. Find a mentor. I connected very early on in my career with Erica Friedman, and we've been doing research together for a very long time. And, I learned a lot from her. She asked me some pretty hard questions, which I am thrilled that she did. And now I ask her some pretty hard questions too. And it's that give and take. And I also think that when you connect with other people, don't be afraid to connect with people who are different from you or who bring a different expertise than you have, because then together you can be a pretty formidable team.
Dr. Olson, I think you have your hand up if you'd like to speak on it.
Yes, because I would like to emphasize the education. So get education, because many people are driven to this field of by a love for animals, but you need to have species-specific knowledge about animal behavior and to have competences in this whatever field of human-animal bond you are pursuing a career in. And if animal-assisted interventions is the field you want to work in, this is very important in order to secure the welfare of your co-worker. And I think that knowing that the two of you have a good relationship will be of most importance when you shall work in practice. And then I take for granted that you also have good social skills and that you have a desire to help people as well.
Wonderful, yeah, absolutely. So I wonder if, building on that, and you can kind of weave in answers to past questions as ideas come to you. We have a question, what is your background and what led you kind of on your path to human animal bond in this current position as a director? Which I know is a very large, broad question, but if you could answer any points to that person's question would be helpful.
I'll start only because it's a good example of what you shouldn't have done. I was raised without any animals, never went to veterinary school, was involved in ecology and public health, studied fire ecology, and really just at the beginning of my doctoral work, it was recommended for all kinds of financial reasons mainly, to study dogs, stray dogs. I didn't, and that brought me into the whole world of our interaction with animals, with dogs. And then after studying all the bad things that dogs do to the world, all the grief, I decided, well, I bet both sides are true, because I kept hearing that animals were good for you and that people really love them. And so it was really from the back door, which gives me a certain amount of balance and pleasure of understanding that nothing is very one-sided, and that things that are important are usually important both for good and bad reasons. So that's how I sort of got into it. And that's one of the things that I'm concerned when people say they want to study the human animal bond. It might be better to have at least some area that's a little bit more developed and recognized, whether it be behavior, veterinary medicine, ecology, public health, social work, psychology, and then merge and bring it together, rather than just trying to be such a super generalist. And what's wonderful about the field is that, like right here at Purdue, we have people who are gerontologists and psychologists, veterinarians. It's all just, that's the way it lends itself anyway. So my suggestion to students who want to study everything is you can, but just don't do them all at the same time.
Good advice, Dr. Beck.
I'll sort of tag on to that as well. I started my graduate training in a more general human development psychology program, and actually was studying something else altogether, and went to a conference where NIH was doing a panel on HAI research. And I came back and told my doctoral advisor, this is what I want to do. And, I think having a really supportive advisor was very helpful. So that's something I always recommend for students who are looking to go to graduate school, is to find a graduate advisor who will really help champion you and really help you be the best version of your professional self that you can be. So I think that's really important. And then also working within organizations that are very supportive of collaborative work. That's one of the reasons I really enjoy being at Tufts. And I think sort of seeking out organizations to work with that have that collaborative nature is really important. And just the last thing I wanted to add was, I think one of the anxieties I had really early on in my career is, I don't know specifically what I'm going to study for the next 30 years. And I think realizing that that science kind of evolves and what you're interested in evolves. And so allowing yourself to sort of develop over time in this field is important. There's lots of questions to be answered, and you don't have to answer them all at one time.
Dr. Udell, if you'd like to go, that'd be great.
Sure. So yeah, I think I had very similar sort of experiences. And I think I hear this a lot too with my students, is that oftentimes folks start out in one area and then they find something they're passionate about within that field, and then they grow in that area as well. So I started out in biology, pre-vet, pre-med, took one class on animal behavior, and I was hooked. And I knew I wanted to do something related to social behavior, but I hung on to sort of that biology background and also brought in psychology, and then became passionate not only about animal social development, but also human social development. And ultimately now I work with both children who are sometimes, in some cases, have developmental disabilities or are trying to reach certain developmental goals, and animals. And so sometimes those things that you find joy in and passion in along the way, even within your sort of broader fields, can end up being the things you do down the road. So it's about not only getting that education, which is of course super important, but also developing the skills to do the types of things that you are really passionate about. And then absolutely, I definitely want to second what Megan said about finding a supportive mentor and really great collaborators, because that makes a huge difference.
Those are wonderful answers, so helpful. And if you want to answer back at any time, go ahead and dive in. Our next question goes kind of broader now, broader than your individual careers, personally to the field. And the question is, it's a simple one, guys. Here it is. What is a question about the human-animal bond that you hope will be answered over the next decade? So, yeah, you can ponder on that. I love that question.
I'll jump in again on this one. I'm really curious about whether these episodic interactions can actually constitute bonding. And in a university or college setting that I'm in, we see kids who come and people have talked about this. They really are missing their animals back home, and they come and we have sort of devoted fans, would say, of individual therapy dog teams where they seek them out. And I'm empirically just really curious about, well, does that constitute a meaningful bond, or is it too episodic? Or and the bonding element, I'm mostly the intervention guy, but I'm really curious, as Megan and others have said, to keep learning about this. And so that's a question I throw to the universe for study.
Yeah, I have a whole lot of questions that I want answered. Everything from what specific interactions or interventions are effective for which populations, what age groups are most likely to benefit, what about gender differences and cultural differences, and do you have to have had a history of pet ownership to really genuinely benefit? We don't know. Do you have to touch the animal to benefit? We've got some information on some of these questions, but we really need a better understanding. What about dosage? How much? How long? Do you need to interact to accrue any benefits? And this has come up earlier in the day, the animal side of the experience. I would really like to have a better understanding of the animal's quality of life. I would love to see the animal thriving in these situations, not just not being stressed, but enjoying the interaction and benefiting. And so we really need to have a better understanding of sort of their side of the picture. And then also, the information that we have, most of it seems to be on dogs, maybe horses, a little bit on fish and cats, but we really need to have a better understanding of what's happening with different animal species as well. And so, I will stop and let some other people ask their questions, but it just seems like I have so many questions that I would love to see answered.
I agree really with everything that Nancy just said. I think just to underscore that, I think what we're learning is that human-animal relationships are very individual and context specific. And I think having our scientific tools catching up to that specificity is really important, that we're not using the same tools or the same approaches for every situation. So I would love to see more data on those specificities. I think that'll really help move practice forward significantly.
Yes, I agree as well. And in order to maybe get some of the answers that Nancy and we are curious about, I suggest that we cooperate even more because now, like these conferences and some world-spanning organizations, that's so nice, but also in the daily life, I think it would be beneficial if the researchers collaborate and can have even bigger numbers of participants, both for the animals and also for the people. And that maybe be the way to answer some of these questions regarding the demographic data.
So our next question kind of digs into your research and your research profile. So without telling us everything you've ever done, which I think some of the questions indicate they want each person to tell us everything they've ever done, I'm going to kind of tailor that question and ask you, what is your favorite recent finding that you found in your team, your lab, your center? Or if you saw something else exciting, feel free to share that. But what's a recent exciting finding you've had in your center or institute on human-animal bond?
Thank you so much. Recently, we did just a very small quality assurance study on our return to activation for our Dogs on Call program in the hospital. And one of the problems that we were actually having was this thing called love bombing, where we were just, I mean, walking into the hospital with a dog is like being a member of the Beatles, and people just, you know, were swamping the dogs. And so we were having to do a little bit of crowd control. But as that has settled down, we've been tracking who is benefiting from these visits. And what we found is that 73% are healthcare workers. Our healthcare workers right now are so stressed, and it is just amazing to see them interacting with these dogs. I realize that's kind of a small finding, but it's very recent. We literally just got the data in the last week. And what we're seeing is just this, I think, big impact from these programs on healthcare workers. And that says a lot about our ability to make a difference when our healthcare workers are struggling from compassion fatigue and burnout and dealing with a massive worldwide pandemic.
Dr. Olson, did you have a finding you wanted to follow up with on that?
Yeah, well, it was just related to our previous answers. And because in one of our latest studies, we did a regression analysis, and we found that it was a difference between the cognitive abilities for the participants in how they reacted in the depression and quality of life. So we saw that if you were lower cognitive skills, then you had more better outcome of the interventions. And I think that's very important in order to tailor the interventions into the different groups, and also how you shall perform the interventions. So,
Alan, go for it.
Okay, because this particular series of studies is, I think, a good example of actually planning for an intervention because you had a theory behind its working. And that was kind of fun. We had people with advanced Alzheimer's that were not eating in hospitalization in the hospital. So working with a collaborator in the School of Nursing, we looked, and there's nothing that holds their attention. And the theory is, if you can hold someone's attention, they'll sit, because that's one of the big problems with Alzheimer's is hyperactivity. They're not, they don't even feel hunger. And so nothing held their attention except fish tanks, just fish, you know, and it's nothing special. It's a nice tank. It's very safe in a hospital setting. You can't get into it. It's very low maintenance, which is important for the situation. But that worked. And it people sat, and if they put food in front of them, they would eat while watching the fish. They were aware of if one fish didn't look right, and so on. And these are people who don't remember their own name. And yet and they were much less active, which was good also. And so it really, for me, it confirmed I think one of the more important reasons why we even like animals. And that is this, we are fascinated by nature, the biophilia hypothesis. And it's so ingrained that it even survives dementia. And so that I thought was kind of exciting. And it really almost answers another question that you just asked. Not everybody, you know, needs or wants animal contact. About 40% of the population doesn't have any companion animal. That doesn't mean that's the 40% that explains all sick people and crazy people and so on. It's just not the way it works. But I suspect, and that's an area I would really like to study, that while love of animals may not be universal, love of nature or something related to living is universal. And of course, animals are nature on demand, so they're the best way of getting your dose of nature. So that's one of the areas I'd like to study, but that particular study brought all this home to me.
Wonderful. Thank you for that answer. And I've got some beautiful hands up. We've got 3 hands up and 5 minutes to go. So I'm excited to hear some more answers, and I'll go in the order I think they came in. So Dr. Ben Fett, if you'd like to go next.
Thank you, Maggie. I'll just say, there's some really interesting stuff coming out of the lab around sort of cross-pollinating disciplines. Nicole Harris, a graduate student in BARC, looked at social emotional learning in a program called Building Confidence through canines in children 5 through age 12. And then Freya Green looked at, and Nancy spoke to this, about situating with new populations interventions. And we have a program now running in its 4th year with the local police precinct to provide constable stress reduction through interactions with dogs. So it's a cross-pollination of fields or situating interventions in new or novel settings.
All right, next, Dr. Olson.
Yes, it was a follow-up on Alan, because we did a very fun study with a randomized control study with also the PARO, the Robotic Seal. And we found that actually dementia patients who are severe in their dementia, they had more effect of the PARO, so that PARO was able to decrease the agitated behavior statistically, but the dogs weren't. And I think that's also interesting, even though this is a human-animal bond conference, in order to take care of the welfare, maybe sometimes we don't need to include live animals into the interventions, but also alternatives.
Very interesting. Yes, thank you for noting that. All right, next we'll have an answer from Dr. Udell.
So a lot of our animal-assisted intervention work we've done with dogs, like many people, but a lot of our human-animal bond work is actually done with cats. And looking at the cat-human bond, some of the exciting things that we found recently are just the strong bonds that cats and people can share. And even from the cat's perspective, often they're forming secure bonds, they're seeking out sociability and attention from people. As long as their humans are attentive towards them, they're seeking it out at the same rates that we're seeing pet dogs in homes doing so. They're preferring human contact to other types of reinforcers. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, kind of what Nancy was saying earlier about really understanding different species and coming to understand sort of what strengths that those species bring to the table, what strengths individuals within each species bring to the table, and really capitalizing on those to improve the mutual relationships and the well-being both of the people and the animals, both just in terms of living together or interacting together, or maybe an animal-assisted intervention. So we're really excited about what we're learning about cats as well.
Very exciting to bring cats to the table. Wonderful. Well, gosh, those flew by so quickly. So I'm just gonna do a little wrap up here before we head off, but I want to really thank our center directors for taking the time to do this. You know, they are leading wonderful and amazing work across the globe, and they managed to take this time to answer our questions. And it was so much fun and such a delight. I mean, so many varied backgrounds and varied research interests, and hopefully some inspiration if you are interested in this field. These are the leaders, and watch this space, watch their centers. And thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to view this later, it will be online. And now I invite you to join for our next speaker back in Huba. So thanks, everyone.